"What the hell did you just say to him?" The voice wasn't loud, yet it made the entire store seem to stop breathing. It didn't come from behind the counter, but from the man standing right at the entrance, his eyes as sharp as knives, wearing an unbranded coat, yet each step carrying an unmistakable weight. An hour earlier they had thrown an old man out, assuming he was nothing more than a rambling vagrant. But they didn't know sometimes you don't have to draw a gun to make a room feel smaller. And in that moment, that was when everything began to change color. He arrived at 10:14 a.m. without making a sound, yet something in the air shifted the moment he opened the door. It wasn't that his presence instilled fear, rather. It made the space grow quieter, as if the entire room suddenly remembered it had ever been serious. Walter Red Rourke, 76, walked on legs no longer whole. Each step echoed a truth others had forgotten. Battlefields never vanish, they merely change locations. His jeans were worn at the knees, his leather boots scuffed smooth, and his old military jacket carried the scent of time. Atop his head sat a faded gray cap bearing the SEAL Team 6 logo, almost unrecognizable, like it had once passed through fire and chosen to stay. He sought no one, surveyed nothing. He strode directly to the cashier's counter as though what he came for was already there. His hand pressed against the cold glass, thick, calloused, trembling slightly but not weak. His eyes were neither clouded nor dim. They were sharp and clear, as if still observing through a rifle scope. He asked only one question, his voice low and precise as a command. "Do you have any Springfield Moan 1903 left in stock?" The young clerk behind the counter did not look up immediately. When he finally met Rourke's gaze, his eyes brimmed with confusion before tightening into a smile. "Sir, this is a gun store, not a museum." No laughter came from the old man, nor any rebuke. Only a slow, deep look and a silence that weighed as if he were weighing whether it was worth explaining to someone who never intended to understand. Then he nodded a faint, weathered nod, as though he had nodded that way before entering places no one was sure he would leave. No one noticed him lightly touch the glass with his fingertip, not a sign, but a reflex, as if seeking to refeel the cold metal of days gone by, when a weapon was not a collectible but the line between life and death. The way he placed his hand on the counter quietly, with resolve, belonged not to a casual customer but to a man who had waited 12 hours in a rainforest for a signal, simply to maintain silence. He turned away, unhurried, unbowed. His silhouette merged with the pewter light streaming through the entrance, like a ripple of memory set to vanish if you didn't look twice. The young clerk returned to his phone, unaware of whom he had just shown the door to in his own world. His name did not appear on social media. No one called him by his old nickname anymore. Yet every place he had passed through, every man he had carried on his back under fire, every front line remembered him clearly. Red Rourke needed no business card, for some men need no listing, they are their own definition. In the parking lot he paused for a moment. He did not look back. Yet the breeze against his collar made him shiver, not from cold but from something stirring within him. Not pain, but familiarity, familiar with how people see only the gray hair, never wondering about the years it took to grow there. And that morning, when the door closed behind him, no one in the store realized they had just let a piece of history walk away without asking to look back. If you ever see someone walking away in silence, will you take the time to ask, "What's your name?"
Welcome to Veteran Best Stories, where the war ends, but the stories live on. From the foxholes to front porches, we honor the silent battles our veterans still fight. Subscribe and walk with us beyond the battlefield.
She stood at the end of the row of rifle cartridges, her hand resting lightly on a box of 30-06 rounds, as if weighing a potential purchase. But in truth, she was not looking at any numbers. Her gaze followed the man limping out of the shop, his eyes as still as a lake on a windy day. She showed no surprise, no sorrow, only the calm of someone who has witnessed too much to be astonished. Atop her head was a faded olive-green baseball cap, brim pulled low to shadow eyes hardened by years of experience. No one in the store knew that she was more than just a customer. When Red disappeared beyond the door, she calmly reached into her coat pocket and pulled out an old phone, its screen cracked at the top right corner. With one thumb, she tapped a shortcut, no hesitation, no searching, just a single ring, then an answer. She spoke 3 words, only 3. Red has arrived. Then she hung up, no further comment, no change of expression. Inside the shop, life continued as if nothing had happened. Country music played steadily over the ceiling speakers. Fingers swiped screens, laughter bubbled, and the indifferent glance from behind the register remained unchanged. But anyone standing outside would have felt the atmosphere shift, as though something was starting up slowly but surely. At 11:16, a matte black SUV slid in at the far end of the lot, drifting into a parking space like a shadow. The engine idled, no signals blinking, its dark windows reflecting the silvery sky. 2 minutes later, a second black SUV arrived, then a third, followed by an old pickup truck with caked-on mud beneath its chassis. Next came a matte-painted Jeep, its exhaust still warm. None of the vehicles rushed, nor did any arrive late, each parked in an apparently preordained spot. Nobody stepped out immediately, no doors opened at once, no horns honked, no phone calls were made, no snapshots taken. Yet the entire lot seemed to sag, as if an invisible weight pressed down on every pebble. Inside those vehicles were no visible weapons or uniforms, but something heavier memories. Then, almost simultaneously, the doors began to open, not in unison, but with a steady cadence, as if each person waited for the exact moment to step out. They did not hurry. They did not look around or exchange nods. Each descended as though having done so thousands of times. Their movements were unostentatious, yet resolute. They carried nothing but faded jeans, worn jackets, and a few pairs of scuffed combat boots, yet their faces and their eyes bore the weight of an era none of the shop's patrons had lived through. One bore a scar on her wrist, another limped slightly, a third stood rigid, as if never taught to bow his head. One adjusted the collar where his name tag used to rest. Another placed a hand over his heart, not in salute, but touching an oath never spoken aloud. No signals were exchanged, yet all eyes turned toward the shop. A few passers-by halted, sensing something amiss but not knowing why. A little boy clutched his mother's hand, eyes widening, and his mother glanced back. She did not recognize anyone, but instinct made her hold her child closer. Inside, none of the staff noticed. They remained glued to their phones, still sending emojis over comedic videos. They did not see the silhouettes beyond the glass pane, but time had begun to slow. A silence was building, neither tense nor accusatory, but profound, like a river that needs no roar to confirm its existence. And in the midst of it all, no one spoke a word. But if you have ever served, ever stepped into lands unmarked on maps, you would understand this was not a reunion. This was a reminder. Silent, unwavering, and impossible to ignore. Have you ever witnessed a silence that makes an entire space hold its breath? My dear viewers, stay tuned for the story that will leave you speechless. Please take a moment to like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always exciting to see someone joining us from all around the world. They stepped inside each person, each step like shadows bearing the weight of an entire past. The door chime rang, a sound meaningless on any ordinary day, but now it felt like a solemn signal granting passage to something sacred. No one spoke. Nothing needed to be spoken. The shop's atmosphere, once carefree with laughter, suddenly slowed. No one knew why they held their breath. Yet every sense was attuned to the unspoken. The man at the front carried an unmistakable presence. His silver hair was cut short. His shoulders were broad and straight, unbowed by age. On his chest gleamed the trident insignia, the sacred emblem only those who have stood between life and death for others may wear. He did not scan the room. He did not appraise anyone. He walked directly to the cashier's counter, where two young clerks were slowly realizing that this was nothing like anything they had ever encountered. He placed on the glass a small, neatly folded object, a scorched, crumpled scrap of fabric with frayed edges. No explanation was needed, yet anyone who saw it would pause. It was a piece of an American flag, once part of Red Rourke's uniform, torn off to bandage a wound, a subconscious symbol of survival. He said nothing about the battle, made no mention of blood or time. He simply left the fragment there as a witness requiring no interpreter. Next, he withdrew from his coat pocket an aged photograph, its edges smudged with dust and grainy with age. In the image, 9 soldiers stood in Iraq's parched terrain. Some wore weary smiles. Others squinted under the scorching sun. Yet all leaned on one another, standing in formation, as if it were the last moment they would stand whole. At the center stood a younger, more robust figure, but his eyes were unmistakable. Red Rourke, bearing the same weight in his gaze that the man at the counter bore this morning. The trident bearer did not look at the clerks. He looked into the glass, as though addressing his own reflection. His voice was deep, low, not angry, but conveying something greater, a reminder compressed by years of silence. "An hour ago," he said, "a man carried me out of hell and into this store." He needed no further explanation. There was no need to describe where that hell lay, or how far Red had carried him, under how much fire, with how little hope remaining. Everything was in that torn cloth, in the old photograph, and in the presence of the 12 men standing behind him, silent, yet firm as a fortress. "He did not come seeking recognition," he continued, "but we came to remind you, never forget those who kept you safe so you could scroll TikTok in peace." No one reacted. The young clerk swallowed hard and took a half step back. No apology was uttered. No defensive gesture made. Only the raw exposure of those who suddenly realized they had been on the wrong side of the story. No one threatened them. No one needed to. These men carried no visible weapons. They themselves were living proof of a generation that chose silence over boasting, patience over demands. And their presence, the silent yet impossible to ignore presence, said everything that needed saying. Have you ever witnessed a presence so profound that it made you stand at attention even without orders? The glass door had barely closed behind the last SEAL team member when a customer stepped in. He was a man in his early 50s, wearing worn sneakers and a once-a olive drab military jacket faded by time. He had no idea what he was about to witness, and then he froze in the doorway. Before him was a scene unlike any other store. 13 men standing in a half circle before the cashier's counter. No one spoke, no one moved. There was no shouting, no rebuke, only a stillness that had shape, form, and weight, as though the collective memory of a generation had risen to do what society had long forgotten: protect one another. He reached into his pocket for his phone and took a single shot. No filters, no angles, just the moment, raw and real and exactly right. He posted the image to a large veterans forum with a brief caption: "When you dismiss a veteran, be ready for this." No hashtags, no tagging of influencers, just a picture and a sentence. Yet within 45 minutes, it had spread across the 3 largest U.S. veterans boards and begun a life of its own. The first comment came from an anonymous account with a familiar initials tag, WR1983. It read, "Walter Rourke saved my whole team in Honduras in 2083. Never a word of self-praise. That comment garnered over 3,000 likes within 2 hours. Another, apparently younger, wrote, "If that's Red Rourke, then they just expelled history from the room." A shorter comment struck deeper. "He's not just an old man. He's why I'm alive to write this." The photo began appearing on small community pages, then rapidly spread to larger platforms. It needed no context. No one knew the full story, but everyone felt something profoundly real and elemental at work, something that hundreds of words could never convey, yet a single image could. The photo was far from polished. Low resolution, dim lighting, precisely what made it unfakeable. Every element was rough and honest. The glare off the storefront glass, the long shadows, and the presence of 13 figures steadfast as any monument. Some commenters recognized unit patches on jackets, familiar scars on a face they once followed into battle. Each person looking at it saw a piece of their own memory come alive. Some began searching for Walter Rourke. On old military forums, folks unearthed faded articles, leaked reports. Not much information, but enough to confirm. He had served in over 30 operations, from Panama to Mogadishu. One of the few who kept his vow of silence, no books, no television appearances, no pursuit of glory. And now, one small act standing in silence had brought his name back into conversation. Not to praise him, but to remind us. Do you think a single photo can change the way a whole society sees a person? Dear viewers, take a moment to relax or grab a drink, then listen on the story's next twist awaits. Comment 1 if you're enjoying the tale, so we know you're still here. There was no press release, no banners unfurled, no loud outrage swept in, just one photograph, one name, one memory. But that was enough. The photo 13 men standing in silence became something the whole town could not ignore. It wasn't aired on national television, yet it spread like a quiet wave through emails, Facebook groups, and printed posters pasted on barbershop walls, diners, and the post office. Every copy, every slightly blurred print carried the same feeling that something profound, never before told, had just occurred right here. The gun shop once, a stark place of price tags and gleaming firearms behind glass, suddenly felt different. No new signage, no renovation needed. The only change was in one glass display. Inside sat the Springfield M1903, neatly arranged. Beneath it lay a small, scorched scrap of striped flag, its star-field corner torn. Next to that was the old photograph, 9 soldiers amid Iraq's red dust, and in the center, Red Rourke. In front of the display was a handwritten sign. No bold font, no flourish, just a few words in ink, scrawled but weighty. Because one man chose silence, and others refused to let him stand alone. The shop manager said little. He declined interviews. Each morning, he quietly wiped the glass and replaced the small vase of flowers beside it. On some days, someone would leave an extra item on the counter, a challenge coin, a unit patch, a folded note reading, "I am alive because of him." No one signed their name to these offerings. They didn't need to. The town's high school usually displaying only flags, and the principal's portrait received an anonymous envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter on yellowed paper recounting a mission in 1970. 6 soldiers extracted from the jungle across the Cambodian border. The leader's name was not given, but the letter included a map, an assault plan sketch, and a final line: "Whoever survived owes him their life." The school board didn't know what to do with the letter. In the end, they framed it and hung it in the main hallway beside the history classroom. No explanation required. Anyone who read it would understand. It was more than scrap paper. It was a doorway to a time when honor was embodied by action. No cameras, no speeches. Town residents began visiting the gun shop not to buy, but to look. They came slowly. Some simply stood before the display. A few pulled out their phones, then slipped them back into their pockets. It seemed they felt the silence should not be disturbed by any camera flash. An old Marine veteran of Fallujah walked past the shop. He said nothing. He paused, snapped to attention, and stared at the photograph. Then he raised his hand in a slow, weighty salute, not to anyone in particular, but to a spirit. He turned and walked on in silence. In a town accustomed to sail signs and truck horns, that quiet spoke louder than anything. If one man could cause an entire town to stop and reflect, wouldn't you want to know who he is? 2 weeks have passed. The town has returned to its daily rhythm, or at least it's trying. But some things, once awakened, never go back to sleep. On the old corner, where two streets intersect, like a scar through the town center, there's a small cafe called Junction Brew. It's nothing special, worn wooden tables and chairs, a coffee machine that hissed with every brew, and chalkboard menus that blurred on humid days. Yet for some, it remained the only place preserving the town's untouched heartbeat. And every morning at exactly 7:05 a.m., a man would enter, seal cap faded to silver, pulled low, boots worn at the heels, his step soft but not weak. Red Rourke never arrived late, nor did he ever sit anywhere but the window-side table. He ordered the same thing each day. Black coffee, no sugar, no cream, no conversation. He sat quietly, gazing out at the light filtering through the trees and dropping onto the street like a gentle greeting. No one disturbed him. The barista knew he valued his peace. No one invited him into small talk, though sometimes someone yearned to say thank you. Yet there was something about Red that said, gratitude isn't in words, but in living worthy of men like him. That morning began like any other. No hint of change. The sky was overcast, the coffee still hot, and Red sat alone. But at 17 past the hour, the door opened, and a silent current swept in. 13 men stepped inside. No uniforms, no flags, just jackets, combat boots, eyes that had seen too much. They did not speak, nor place orders. They walked straight to Red's table. He looked up. His gaze was unchanged, sharp as a blade that had cut through the darkness of foreign forests. Yet today, there was something softer in his eyes. The youngest among them, a man not yet 30, bearing a small scar on his wrist, paused before Red. He spoke quietly, almost a whisper. "If you don't mind, we'd like to sit with you." Not a sound. No further words. Just Red's slow, deliberate nod. One by one, they pulled out chairs and sat around him. No one spoke. No one checked their phones. They were simply men sitting together as if the empty spaces in their lives had just found their anchor. The cafe's atmosphere shifted, not from fear, not from reputation, but from an unspoken understanding. This was something profound, a significant moment wrapped in absolute silence. No one broke it. The barista quietly brought extra cups of coffee, placing them down without asking. The other patrons, rather than whisper amongst themselves, simply exchanged respectful nods, witnessing something sacred they dared not interrupt. An elderly woman near the counter placed her hand over her heart. A Desert Storm veteran removed his cap and set it on the table. One person averted their gaze to hide a tear that seemed to come from nowhere. Yet all understood this was not a celebration, nor a tribute. It was a homecoming, no fanfare needed, no trumpets blowing. Red said nothing all morning. He simply sipped his coffee, watching the street as sunlight began to pierce the clouds. But that day, he was not alone. The table built for one was now overflowing, not with food, but with presence. And in that silence, something was forgiven, something was healed. Because sometimes the greatest things are spoken by saying nothing at all. If you ever see an elderly person sitting quietly in a cafe, don't ask what they've done. Just give them space. For sometimes, they are the reason we can sit here today. There are those who choose to live in silence not because they have nothing to say, but because they have spoken through the lives they lead. The story of Walter Red Rourke reminds us that greatness does not always come with a spotlight. Sometimes, it exists in a measured stride, a simple nod, or a cup of black coffee with no sugar at a small street corner cafe. We live in an era where everything must be proven by likes and followers. Yet perhaps it's time we learn to listen to the silence where true value does not require a name to be spoken. If this story touched you, leave a comment sharing the quiet hero you have known, someone you owe thanks to but have never had the chance to thank. Please subscribe and share this video with someone you think needs to hear it. Because sometimes you are the one who brings healing to someone else with a single story. Thank you for staying until the end. We'll see you in another story where silence still has tales to tell.